Hello, everybody, and welcome to this latest in the ValuesJam guest session series. And Matt, brilliant to have you here. And to start off with, please introduce yourself and tell everybody about the great work that you do.
Okay. Well, my name is Matt Gillis, and I appreciate you having me on here. This is exciting today. And I have been in some form of finance or support organizational work for the last 30 years, actually, but more focused in about 25 years. My wife says, don't tell people 30 years. It makes you sound old, but hey, I'm a lot of experience, but have been doing that and have evolved over the years of working with people. I started out in banking and finance, which is great, but then really was interested in looking at leadership and how I could develop leaders and be a better leader myself. So it's just evolved over the last few years of really focusing on our people and how to make them better leaders. I mean, they know their trade, I know finance, but how do we deal with other people and how do we make them better at what they do by being better leaders? So over the last few years, especially once the pandemic set in and everybody took to social media, I did a little bit of the same, wanting to share some of that knowledge, and have just kept doing it over the years. Not for any direct reason other than to help people, again, to be better leaders and share my knowledge with them and to give back a little bit. Because I still have a job. I started a new job this week in as a firm administrator for a CPA firm, and that's kind of right up my alley because I'm dealing with finance, I'm dealing with organizational structure and people again, but I still want to continue to deliver good information to people and help them if they have questions or need to know more about leadership.
Great. Now, for people who want to get in touch with you, where's the best place to find you?
Well, I'm on almost all the platforms. I'm on Twitter as Matt Gillis, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and LinkedIn.
Okay.
Pinterest also, although I don't get a lot of Pinterest people. But you can search Matt Gillis. I'm on most all of those as Matt Gillis, or I'll come up as Matt Gillis on any of those. So yeah, you can find me on any of those platforms. I'm mostly focused on these days on LinkedIn.
Okay. This might be a bit unfair on finance people, but I think many people who might be looking at this and listening to you talk might be surprised to hear the words finance and people so closely together. And so, do you think that it's that finance gets a bad rap, or do you think that you're different than a lot of finance people?
A little bit of both. I think. I think we need good leaders in every industry, and I think finance, because your people are your biggest asset. I mean, no matter what you do, and you want, especially today, because you've got kind of both ends of it. And I would say I'm probably leaning toward the older side, but in that middle, where you've got an older group that really is set in how we used to do things. And then you got that younger group that's coming out that has always had their phones. They never really had a lot of social and one-on-one interaction. So we're having to kind of get them into a spot that they can be productive. And then we've also got to get that older group to realize that and kind of get into that spot, because there's, again, a gap in between there. So I think whether you're in finance or any industry, if you don't have that, you can't really teach your people how to make better leaders, because finance, we need those younger people learning how to interact with our clients, with our customers, and become better at what they do, and also teach that to the people coming up behind them. And I think if we don't focus on it, we're going to have a huge gap there.
Yeah, I recognize that as well. And I guess finance is one of the functions where they feel this more acutely because, many jobs that are not office based, they have to be in the workplace, right? So if you're serving food, you can't do that from home.
Exactly.
Whereas finance, I would imagine that quite a large percentage of those people do now work remotely at least part of the time. And I have this, see what you think of this theory actually, Matt, because um, pre-pandemic, people used to be together in the office Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, right? And because we're social beings, relationships developed. And as a result of the positive relationships that developed, collective productivity increased, and the organization was the beneficiary with no need to invest anything in terms of time or effort because the people did it themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So then the pandemic, and then working remotely or dispersed, naturally relationships are diluted because you're not together so much. So it stands to reason that collective productivity will drop. And I think leaders need to face up to the challenge that in the absence of those relationships developing naturally because people were together, leadership has the responsibility to create another way in which those relationships form and grow. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that's exactly right. You have to be more proactive now because you don't have everybody together. And that means getting video calls, things like that, which people again are hesitant to do because we didn't do any of that really until we got to the pandemic. I mean, there were some before, but pandemic started everybody. And there were people that didn't want to get on the camera, but you take that away and you're missing a huge opportunity to build relationships. You're missing a lot of that body language and knowing how you're coming across to people. So you really have to be very proactive in doing that, because once you stop doing that, you really lose a lot of your relationship. And I think we've seen that repeatedly in not only organizations, but probably a lot in politics and government. I know here in the United States that I think I love, I believe it was Simon Sinek was writing about relationships. And the biggest thing I think with our government, and I'm not going to get into politics, but the biggest thing with our government and kind of our disagreements was when we no longer required a lot of our senators and representatives to live in Washington, because they would disagree on things, but then you would see them at birthday parties, at events, at church, and they had relationships outside of that. And now they mostly just see each other when they're arguing over things.
Yeah.
So the same thing goes with organizations. If you don't have a relationship with somebody, we can argue about something, but we need to be able to come back and work through it and have that relationship. And I think we're missing that because I'm old school and I still like to walk around. I walk around and talk to everybody in every department, and they get to know me, I get to know them. And that way, when we do have an issue, it's easier for them to come to me or us to address it. So I think that's big. And I think it's got to be very proactive on leadership's part to set those things up, like you said.
Mm. I'm so pleased to hear you talk about managing by walking around, because my first career was commercial hospitality management. So running five-star hotels and conference centers and the like. And the job that I learned there without realizing it actually was that your customers are the most important people. And the people that are in front of your customers are the second most important people. They're your employees that are delivering the service. And I remember arriving at a new job and saying to my executive assistant, you're not going to see me very much because I'm going to be out all day with the guests and with the employees, and then we'll catch up on correspondence and stuff like that. And yet other industries don't tend to work like that. I remember, where was it? In Hong Kong, I think we invited a hotel general manager from Four Seasons into a workplace environment. And he spoke to the supply chain. It was an outsourced business model. So, a cleaning company, a catering company, security company, all of that sort of stuff. And he asked the question of the managers, what's the split in your time between meetings and being with your customers and your employees? And broadly, they were 80% meetings, 20%. And he said, I'm the other way around. And that was about 15 years ago, but it's kind of stuck with me.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's it. And I can tell a big difference in when you do that and you build those relationships than when you don't, because and I don't mind the difficult conversations, because I have learned over time that people just want to be listened to. They want to be heard, and they don't always want an answer. My wife has taught me that to just listen first and then try to apply whatever we need to it. So that doesn't scare me, people asking hard questions, because again, it's about the connection. And I have noticed my last job I was in, I was CFO of a school and a large church in Orlando. And I would walk around every morning and talk to the teachers. And it took about a year of doing that before they really got comfortable with me coming in and talking to them, because they just saw me as, one of the executives. And I don't know, but I could tell when they started asking me questions and really carrying on conversations in the morning. But it made a huge difference, because I think when we did have to do difficult or hard things, they saw that I was very relational, and the things I did were for a bigger reason, even if they didn't like it sometimes. So it helped a lot. So
Yeah.
I agree. I think 80% of our time needs to be invested in our people. And like you said, our customers too, because I used to say when I was younger that business was about making money. And that's true, because you go into business to do that, but really business is about taking care of your customers,
Yeah.
because that's where your money comes from. So if you're not taking care of both your internal and external customers, you're going to suffer.
Yeah, well said. And the one thing I'll add, and I know we need to get on to our values jam, but the final thing I'd add to your piece about being out there with people is that it has to be authentic. I heard a story about a board of an organization, and they had received feedback that they weren't accessible as senior people to the rest of the people in the organization. So what they did was they agreed, the main board, so I think there were about 8 of them, they decided that every Thursday lunchtime they would go to the employee cafeteria and make it known that anybody could come and join this table of 8, the most senior people in the organization. And
Yeah,
we're shocked that nobody did.
I know. You got to wonder why. No,
So
that's
here's,
always
sorry, go on.
interesting. Very always interesting to see how some of that stuff plays out. But
Yeah.
yes.
So here's the Values Jam card deck. So I'm just going to tip them out. I've got 60 cards here, so I'm just going to give them a quick shuffle, and you think about how many piles of cards you'd like me to make in front of me.
Let's do 7.
7, okay. So I'm going to do 4 on the top line, and then 3 on the second line down. They're different sizes, and pile 1 is top left, 4 is top right, and then we've got 5 on the left, 7 on the right in the second tier. So which number pile shall I choose?
Let's start with 3.
Which number pile though, 1 to 7?
3.
30?
3. Number
3,
3.
sorry.
3. No, I'm mumbling. 3.
Oh, it's okay, it's okay. So,
I'm trying to throw you off. No,
so we've got just 8 cards in this pile. So a number between 1 and 8.
number 1.
Number 1, okay. So the card you've chosen, Matt, is adaptability.
Okay.
And the first question is, what does adaptability mean? And what does it look, sound, and feel like?
To me, I think adaptability is kind of rolling with the punches and being able to go with the flow of what you get into. Like we talked about, walking around and talking to people and not being afraid to take those hard questions, because I always tell my people that if you don't know the answer to something, tell somebody I don't know and get back to them. And I think you've got to have, that's a little bit of adaptability, but I think adaptability is being able to be transparent with people, to being very open and building that trust relationship, and to be able to learn what you don't know. I mean, there's always talk about, you need to learn what you don't know, but then there's things that you don't know you don't know. And as you pick those up, that's adaptability to me, because you're always going to be faced with things, no matter what you're doing, that you don't understand or that come out of left field. Because like I said, when you're dealing with people as you move up into a management role, when I was in finance, I knew finance and I could answer those questions for you. But then as I moved up, there are a lot of questions that came at me during the day that were not necessarily finance related. And I had to adapt to that. I had to learn about that. And I think good leaders, they realize what that is and they start preparing, because I always tried to learn my boss, what he wanted, what he was going to anticipate, and be prepared when I went in there. And I think that's a bit of adaptability. If I come across something, even with this job, and I'm kind of going through drinking from a fire hose this week of learning everything they do and their systems and what it is. And when I see something that I'm just not quite sure about, I'll go look it up. And I tend to spend more time studying that than I do the other because I want to know it. I don't necessarily am thinking, well, somebody's going to ask me this or they're going to quiz me on it. I want to know it because I want to do my job better. So that to me is adaptability, being able to kind of adapt to your surroundings and what you're doing and anticipate what you might have to do.
Yeah, I think it's a great definition, and I thank you for choosing that card because adaptability is one of my five core values, actually.
Mm-hmm.
And just like you said, I think it's really down to being able to just do things differently when things don't turn out the way they were expected, and just respond in a positive way rather than either sticking to the original plan in the face of change, or maybe feeling bad that things aren't as you predicted they would be, which sometimes happens.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think we all deal with that. That's human nature. But I try not to because I try to let's see how we can fix it and make it better. But I think that's human nature. I read a great book and I wish I could remember the author, but it's The Five Gears. I don't know if you've ever read that book, but it is such a great book on adaptability because he associates the five gears like a gear shift with your relationships with other people. Like first gear would be sitting on a couch doing nothing, watching TV. Second gear would be having an interactive conversation with somebody. Third gear would be you're having we're listening and having a deep conversation. Fourth gear would be you're in deep work. You're trying to solve a problem. And then fifth gear is kind of like flow. You're just going through your day working and talking about how you need to be adaptable when you're in certain situations. When you get home, your wife wants you to be in third gear where you're engaging with her, with your family, with things like that. And sometimes we come home in fourth gear where we're asking questions, we're still on our phones answering emails and things like that. So as you really opened up my mind to adaptability, even going through my workday in situations, should I be in third gear here with this employee, kind of building a relationship? Do I need to shift to, or when do I need to shift to fourth gear and then fifth gear going through my day? So that gave me a great perspective on things I had not considered because I'm a big fourth and fifth gear person. So I rarely get into first and second gear, which is probably not good for me, but definitely third gear. I have to pay attention. And he was talking about in the book to all his employees plus his wife, they would just hold up fingers. Like if he was answering emails and doing something, his wife would just hold up three fingers. And he knew without even having to have those difficult conversations that he needed to shift into third gear. So to me, I've tried to apply that a lot to my adaptability in my daily routine.
Right. And you've reminded me of a guy. So he ran a course for when I was with Marriott and their Spirit to Serve program. And I remember him telling how when he's finished a busy day, I wonder if he still does this actually. When he's finished a busy day and he's on his way home, he
Mm-hmm.
reminds himself that his kids are looking forward to seeing their dad, even though his brain is frazzled because he's been dealing with problems all day or whatever it is. And
Right.
what I remember is the technique that he used to get himself sorted. So he used to say he stood at the front door of his house before going straight in, took a breath, and then regarded turning the key in the latch as turning the ignition on for him as dad.
That's great. Yeah, I love that. I love that because my kids are grown and gone. I have a granddaughter at this point, but and I was there for them, but still there were a lot of times that I was at work too late or doing things or too busy. And I look back on that now and wish I would have done better. Um, but yeah, I think that's great. We need to focus on that. And today's the best day to start.
Today for sure. And what about that? There's the metaphor part of the question. So when you think of the word adaptability, what image comes to mind? What sound comes to mind? And what feelings come to mind?
Oh goodness. Um, I think with adaptability, I would say a little bit of stress because there's always going to be that unknown. When you think about adaptability, not so much stress when I walk out this door and go down the hall and somebody hits me with something I wasn't expecting. I don't think I feel stress at that moment, but thinking about it, I think a little bit of stress because you've got to be able to shift gears, especially as busy as we all are today. When I leave this office, I'm on a mission to do something, and so I think that's a part of it that it stresses me sometimes to stop. But again, that's where that shifting gears comes in. You've got to, because if an employee is coming up to you, they need something. And it might be that you listen and say, hey, I'm going to have to come back and get with you. But so I see that as a little bit of stress, but then I think it's a great opportunity. I worked with somebody when I was in my banking days that would always talk about, let's don't talk about problems, they're opportunities. And that really had a mindset shift for me to really think about that. So when we're our kids, our employees, the neighbor, our wives, our spouses, they come to us, those are opportunities and we need to take those. We may not be able to address it right then, but it's such a great opportunity to bring things to the forefront that we may not have thought about before. And I was listening to a podcast this morning that talked about, I wish I could remember the name of the guy. It was a submarine general. But anyway, he had a horrible submarine crew that he was working with. Uh, and anyway, he shifted them from coming to him to ask all the questions to when they came to him, they said, this is what we're doing.
Yeah.
And that shifted that leadership response to them. And that way, when he wasn't available, they were ready to make that leadership. So I think tying that back in is those opportunities when I walk out, that feeling of positivity to know that my people are at a point now where they're going to come to me with answers and solutions. And I'll be able to say, that's great. Or I may say, let's put a pin in it and I'll come back and talk with you. But I think that is an encouraging feeling that I feel also. So
I think that mindset towards adaptability is so critical. And I guess because adaptability is something that I tend to focus on, maybe I've had chance to practice more than if I hadn't focused on it, and that's helped. But I find that it's really helpful to suspend judgment when something happens and not to invest energy in whether it was a good thing or a bad thing, more focus the energy on, well, what are you going to do next? Because that's all that's important at the end of the day, right?
yes.
And then I learned, what's his name? Dr. David Riley or O'Reilly, I can't remember. But he explained that the way that he deals with things that are unexpected. So he said, imagine that you're going for an appointment across town and you need to take a bus to get there. And so you know what time the bus is due, and so you go to the bus stop, and the time that it was due passes, and so does 5 minutes or 10 minutes, and it didn't come. So in situations like that, he consciously, and this is the point that you made earlier, it's about being consciously adaptable. He says to himself, so that's the way it is it? And then he just decides what to do next,
Yeah.
which is so simple.
I think that's great because I think we spend so much time over focusing on things and judgment, of things where I think I heard this a long time ago and I try to apply this to myself because I tend to talk myself off the ledge a lot of times. But the difference in judgment and love, I mean, judgment, I can tell you what you did wrong and all this stuff. But when you have that love relationship or you're having that connection with people, you can tell them they're wrong, but then you're trying to help them fix it. What can I do to fix this? Or what can we do now to move on past this? And it's not just that, people see you come in and think, oh, well, they just made up their mind. They're just going to tell me what I've done wrong here. But you get a lot of that. And one of my favorite sayings is FAT. Let's be fat, FAT, flexible, adaptable, and teachable. And I say that anytime I have committee groups, employees, anything, let's be flexible, adaptable, and teachable because there's going to be so many things that come at us that we're going to have to stop and change direction, adapt to it, and then learn something from it. And I think anything we do, we should be learning from it, because even if things are going great, there's things that we can learn from it and have that conversation, because our employees want to know that we're listening to them. And what did you see through this that I may have missed, and actually listening to that?
Yeah, you've given me an idea for somebody to do. I wonder if anybody listening to this might take this up. Um, in the world of leadership, it seems, well, in a lot of my experience, I've come across people that when they're in a position of leadership, they seem to feel that they need to look as though they've got all the answers and know everything and not have to change their mind and follow the path to completion, come what may, all of that. So I'm thinking that a fat leaders course would be a really interesting thing to roll out to people.
Yes, that I think it would be, because you're right. You're right. And I think leaders, good leaders, realize that early on. You're not going to have all the answers. And you really need to pay attention and listen to people and really focus on what's going on around you. And that fad has helped me. It was not original with me, but I've used it for probably over 10, 15 years. And first thing I tell groups is that we're going to be fat, and they all look at me
Yeah.
funny. But and then I have to explain it. But that's it. That's probably the one time you want to be called fat.
Well, I was thinking that. I was thinking maybe or somebody would need to do some work on the marketing because, I was thinking, yeah, join our fat leaders course. Oh, I'm not signing up to that.
Be a fat leader. Yep. Yep.
So on those metaphors, I'll just play back some of my thoughts there. So when I think of adaptability, I think of imagery, I think of water, because I think water is an example of something that is really adaptable and it just goes where it can. Um,
Yes.
then for the sound, it's wind chimes, because the chimes are just moving with the wind and allowing themselves to move with it. Um, and the feeling I get for adaptability is a kind of combination of inner confidence that, whatever's going to come, you can handle it. Not
Yes.
not arrogance, but confidence, so that you're some sort of certainty and balance in your ability to be able to do that. And then
Mm-hmm.
also something about kind of going on the ride, rather than being scared of it or what's the unknown. It's like, let's just go on the ride.
Oh yeah, yeah. And I think I like the water, which I agree with that. I think that's a great one, because water is going to fill the space it's in. I mean, and that's going to be adaptable and change. I like the wind chimes, but I also think of maybe a reed or grass, in
Yeah.
a field, how it would blow, and just kind of that kind of gave me the picture there. But I do. I think so much as a young leader, when I was coming along, fear played a lot into that. I was afraid that people weren't going to take me seriously. And I did what you're talking about. And I did get into some crazy situations where I stepped out there. I remember teaching classes and doing things, and I got a lot of questions of why do you think you know more than we do, and you're younger and all of this. But I would just be very honest with them. And I think that was because people can shut down and be different ways. But I just decided, hey, I realize that. And I'm here. And if you don't agree with me, let's talk about it and let's learn from each other. And I kind of did that from an early age. And I think that helped me to develop. And as I got older, and of course, everybody learns as you go through different situations, but I just kind of learned when I needed to talk and when I needed to listen. That's the biggest thing there. And I think that, and I read the Bible a lot, and I think it says that even a fool's considered wise when he holds his tongue. And I think that is so important, that if we do more listening, we pick up on a lot more in what we do as leaders. And people think we're a lot smarter than probably we are sometimes, but that's the important part of it, is listen and formulate what you want to do before you do it.
I love that. And the reason it's strikes me so well and hard is that that's one of the core principles behind the design of the Values Jam game. So
Mm-hmm.
the root of it was a music values jam. And what we recognized was that in a music values jam, you turn up with whatever instrument you've got. Nobody makes fun of you because it's not a very good guitar or anything else. It's just come on in. Nobody then tells everybody what to do. Everybody just joins in. And if somebody stumbles, nobody calls a halt and holds an inquisition. It's just embraced, and we maybe build it into the way that we go forward. And then we were comparing that to kind of a lot of conversations that we have where you're not really listening to the other person because you're figuring out what you want to say. Um, Two people, let's say, in a conversation, they each have their own agenda, trying to navigate it towards that place rather than being more open. And we just thought, wouldn't it be cool to invent something that creates this space to encourage more listening of the other person, no agenda, and just see what happens as a result of it. So that's why what you said means so much to me.
I love it. I love it. And I think human nature, we're all like that. We're all trying to think, oh, what can I say next? And I think it takes practice. And I think I'm a firm believer that leaders aren't born, they're made. And that it just takes practice with us doing things, and we're going to fail at it and just keep trying to be better. And it's taken me a long time not to turn my brain off a little bit and listen and not be thinking of questions. What am I going to ask next? Or what should I ask next? And just listen. And the more you do it, things come to you a lot easier, because I think you're not so anxious about what you're doing, and you kind of free yourself up to ask the important questions and listen. Yeah, I love that.
So we've had a really good exploration there of adaptability at quite a conceptual level. So let's get very nitty gritty now. Let me ask you, where have you noticed a lack of adaptability?
Ooh, that's a big question. I think if we pay attention, we can look at it everywhere. We can see that to some degree. And my mind works like this. When I do something, I'm thinking of, is this the best way to do this? I mean, it could be making coffee at home or my morning routine. I am literally sitting there thinking through my head, how could I shave a few seconds off of my time getting ready in the morning? And I can't turn that off. And that my wife gets very frustrated at that. And I think she loves to, when I'm making coffee and doing stuff in the morning, she loves to just come in the kitchen and stand in the way just to see what I will do. So that's helped me. That's one of those things too, where you look at it, either you can get mad and it can go south real quick, or you can say, okay, I probably need to slow down. There's a reason, if I'm feeling this anxious over trying to get ready in the morning, there's probably something there. So I think if we open ourselves up, we can see it in so many different places. But I think one of the biggest areas, again, is seeing that older generation that's still in the workforce and that younger generation coming in, that there's not a lot of adaptability. And one thing I've discovered, because it's easy for us, everybody focus more on the millennials, the younger generation coming in. It's easy for us to say, well, they just don't know what they're doing, or they don't, whatever. But I think what it is, I really believe that they want to do so much better than what we're giving them credit for. And I think they're in that generation too. They love getting accolades and encouragement. So I think if we just spent some time with them and tried to connect again, because they're not used to connection. They're always been on their phone. They get all of that, but that one-on-one connection. So I think if we look at that and open it up and really say, hey, what can I help you with here? Or do you want to come along on this and then look at what I'm doing and how I'm interacting with people? They're open to learning. I just think we've kind of shut that door there, and there's not the adaptability that there should be, because then you've got that older generation, which, like I said, I'm probably leaning more toward that, but I'm kind of in that middle where I've come up and seen these changes. I was probably in my mid-20s before I ever got a cell phone. So I've had time to get into that. But you got to think, most of this older generation, they were getting probably in their 50s before they got it, and they're still working. Like our managing partners here is 84 years old, and he's still working every day coming in. So there's got to be some adaptability on both sides, because he's kind of, it's not fair for me to say, well, you should just adapt and do everything and let people work from home and do all this stuff, because that's not what the last 50 years of his career have been. So there has to be some adaptability on both sides. And I think a leader, let me make sure this is clear, a leader can be anybody. You can be just starting in your profession, or you can be close to retirement, or you can be a processor, or you can be a manager. You're a leader. People are looking at you, and you need to lead, whether it's in a managerial role or not. So I can't stress that enough. So that adaptability, to me, that's a big part of it, is dealing with those dynamics of this new work crew coming in and this older one that's still managing before they go out. So,
and it's this happens sometimes in ValuesJam. Seemingly quite random things might pop into our heads, and I've learned over time that rather than kind of be too challenging about that, it's best just to share. So I'm apologizing a bit in advance if this feels a bit weird, but the practical example of lack of adaptability for me is the way people go to work. So it's this high routine, just do the same old thing every single day kind of thing. Whereas it's like, well, maybe you just take a left there and go around the block a different way, or whatever it is. Don't go to the same coffee shop all the time.
yes.
Just see what a difference that makes. A friend of mine, this not now, but I lost touch, but he used to just buy random magazines on stuff that he never usually read, because he
Mm-hmm.
said that there was something that kind of woke him up about engaging with stuff that was not normal.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that a bit of a weird example.
I like that. And again, I was listening to a podcast this morning, and they talked about that, going to restaurants that you normally wouldn't, because we have such a bias in our head that I'm not going to like that. But going to restaurants that you wouldn't normally go to and ordering things that you wouldn't normally order, just to shake it up and change it. It doesn't mean you have to like it, but just experience something different. And the example they gave was that they ended up meeting a client at a restaurant that they would not have ever gone to before. And through that, met people that really benefited their career, but they would have never met them had they not done that. So sometimes, it's good to have to shake that up and to change things. And again, my wife can never watch this, but she she does that to me. And what used to frustrate me, I think she does it on purpose to try to get me a little more flexible. But and I have, over the years, I've realized that, where I used to would get mad and frustrated about it. Now I look at it and I think, okay, I need to look at this from a different direction. Now, it may not all be good, but it slows me down enough to think through, like you said, do I need to be doing something different, or change up things sometimes and don't do the same thing all the time? Because I would go to the same restaurant and order the same thing every day of the week if it was up to me. So I like that. And I think that is right. We need to shake it up, because it kind of frees up something in our head sometime when we let other stuff in. I always laugh, and I have a lot of shower moments. So either working through problems or trying to do something, it comes to me in the shower. And I think it's been proven through studies that it's because you're not thinking what you're doing. You get in a routine in the morning and you're just freeing your mind up, and that's when things happen. So I think you doing something different and dislodging, that path that you normally are on triggers something. So
Yeah, I
I
think.
agree.
And the other thing, not to do with what we're talking about, really, adaptability, but I just want to share with you that you have a soulmate here in terms of filling those second spaces. So if I'm making a cup of coffee or tea or whatever it is, and it's going to take, 70 seconds for the kettle to boil, I don't want to waste those. I'm not going to stand there waiting for the kettle to reach the point, right? I'm going to maybe
Yeah.
get the plates that need prepping later, or get the vegetables onto the chopping board, so you just don't have to do that later.
I know. My This is kind of funny. My big thing is, on the weekends I cook omelets. We have omelets on the weekend. And what's so funny is when I'm finished, I mean, literally putting them on the plate, all the dishes have been washed, put up, nothing. You can't even tell that I've been in there doing it because that's what I'm thinking about. I know exactly how long it's going to take to cook the egg, so I can go wash this dish or put
Yeah,
something
yeah.
away. And my wife says, "This, this is not right." But I do. I can't stop that. And I don't know. But I have gotten to where I don't tell other people how to do things. I'll be at work making coffee and I'll be like, well, if you do this, you'd say, I don't do that. So I have controlled myself there a little bit.
Well, I don't know whether this is useful at all or not, but I remember this conversation with somebody and they were saying, why do you have to be like that? Why can't you just do it? Why can't you just take a bit longer and do the
Hmm.
dishes afterwards or, all of that stuff? And
Yeah,
I just said, because life's too short and I want to use the extra time that I gain doing stuff that I really want to do. And this lady
exactly.
went, wow, I've never thought of it like that.
Exactly. The better question is, why don't you do it the way I do it? I get
Matt,
tickled
in
at that.
Values Jam, there's an opportunity for you to ask your own question about adaptability. So I'm going to invite you to do that now. So ask your own question about adaptability, beginning with who, what, where, when, why, or how. And if it's a question that you immediately have the answer to and would like to share, do that. Or if you'd like me to go first, do that.
So I just ask a question
Yeah,
about adaptability.
yeah.
Okay. And you can steer me back on track if I go off the rails with this. But I guess what is, in your experience, what's the biggest challenge or something that you faced where you had to work through being adaptable in a situation?
It was 9/11.
Mhm.
So I was running a five-star hotel, Marriott flag in the UK, and we lost 50% of our forward bookings on that day. And I called an all associates in Marriott, they call them associates, not employees or staff or anything like that, and explained, what had happened, that the bottom had fallen out of our business and that times were going to be tough. And I don't know whether I did use the word adaptable, but I remember just explaining to people that we were going to have to do things differently. So, for instance, we didn't need reservations people because there were no reservations being made, but we still had local weddings to be served. So, guys, we'd like you to come in, take Tuesday, Wednesday off, and come in on Saturday and Sunday and serve food when you've never served food before. But I made a promise that whilst we couldn't guarantee that there would be no layoffs, we would guarantee that that would be as a final resort. Um, and everybody pulled together, and we didn't make one single layoff. So
Wow.
that was an example of where it was tough, and people didn't enjoy it at the beginning, but actually by the end of it, it was one of those times when you'd look back and say, wow, didn't we do a great job together? That kind of thing. What about yours?
That's great too when you can look back on it and say, we did a great job on that and how we did it, because those were such a crazy time. I think everybody was just didn't know what to do. So I guess one of mine, being adaptable. Hmm. Uh, I would say, gosh, not to steal yours, but thinking through different ones. But of course, 9/11, I think everybody probably has an adaptability story from there, but I wasn't thinking about this. But I was in banking during 9/11, and I was over our software that we had implemented to do loan underwriting. Up until that point, we had been strictly kind of a paper, pass it around, get things approved. And about a year and a half, maybe before that, we had gone to an automated system for our underwriters and our loan officers to do loans. And of course, 9/11 hit, everything shut down. And then we started here with PPP loans. The SBA, Small Business Administration, all the small businesses were failing. So basically, the government was giving them money, but they did it through the lending system through the banks, and it was not, again, very rapidly put up. It was not planned out. It was pretty crazy. So we were building it, and I heard the analogy before. It's kind of like flying an airplane while you're trying to build it, and we were doing that. I think both the government and us trying to get things together. We were all at home at that point because things had been shut down. We were having meetings every 2 hours with all our executives from the bank and our software team that we had put together on how to do this and what we needed to do, trying to fix things. Our software department within a month had to come up with a plan to do this rapidly, which it was hit or miss a lot of the time. So they were on these. I mean, we're talking from 8 in the morning to 10 at night. And then after 10 o'clock at night, we were trying to fix the problems that had come. And probably in a month's time, we probably did $2 billion worth of loans to small businesses that were mostly grants. They did have to qualify. There were a lot of things based on their employee size, things like that, in order to pay their employees, like you said, while they're not working, to keep them from having to lay off or shut down. And then once it was over, and they did a couple of rounds of this, so it went on for months. But then once it was over, we had to go back and look at who actually qualified, and now are you going to be able to pay back or get it way or forgiven? So I guess that was a big adaptability for us to be able to shift gears from knowing that we were going to have months to plan out a product, then we're going to have months to train on it and how change management goes into effect, and then roll it out to our customers, till it was, okay, you got a week to build this and get it together, and then you got to go talk to your customers. But it was so great because we had my development staff that was working for me, our credit staff, our loan officers. We were all in there talking to customers because it didn't matter. Customers were calling in. We don't know what to do, much less how to navigate the system you built. And we were all hands on deck, walking them through it. And that to me was adaptable because the software team was never involved with a customer and walking through a loan or something like that. We mostly talked with the loan officer on if something was broke, how do we fix it, or an assistant. But we were all hands on deck. And I think that was huge at that point because we were putting on different hats, and everybody had such a positive attitude about it till nobody minded getting on the phone with a customer and walking them through what they needed to do and how we need to do that. Because again, you can imagine a software developer is not going to know loan products as well as a loan officer. So there are going to be questions or no regulatory things because things were changing so quickly. So they did a great job of walking them through what they could, then passing them off to who could help them, and being able to say, we're going to call you back with an answer to that. So I think, to me, that's probably the biggest thing in my career. I mean, there's so many little adaptable things you have to go through and department changes and things like that. But to me, that was huge that we stood that up in a matter of a couple of weeks and did $2 billion worth of loans in a couple of months and went through all of that, and then was able to work out of all of that on the back end. Because like I said, I don't even think the government really knew what they were doing. They were trying to help people. And that was the focus. And the most important part was to keep people's doors opened and employees paid, help them in any way they could. So we were working through as much as we could and trying to get that done. So I think that was, to me, both in my adaptability of going through that and seeing so many people in our organization and how well that went. But we had a good organization where we had great relationships together. Those executive teams, my teams, I mean, we spent a lot of time together, like we talked earlier, talking and building relationships, laughing and having a good time, and so nobody really thought much about it. It's just, this is what we've got to do.
Yeah.
So.
And I think that's really stuck in my head about what you just described there in terms of recognizing people's capability, and especially their collective capability when there are good relationships in place to be able to be adaptable and deal with a situation, which I think is a great place to kind of start to bring our Values Jam to a close now. There's always one final question, which is this: what are you encouraged to do differently about adaptability? And there's some irony in that, right? As a result of this conversation.
Oh my gosh. I think to be more aware of it, because again, I started a new job this week, so this is perfect to go into how I have done things at other organizations. And I've had pretty long tenures. First bank I worked for was 10 years. The second was 11. And then, of course, I was CFO for about 3 years before we moved and came here. But I have a lot of preconceived, this is the way it needs to work, coming from those different organizations. They weren't all exactly the same, but a lot of that. So coming here now, this is not a publicly traded organization, so it's got a lot of that small business ownership mentality to it. So things are different. And I think there's a lot of room for change and improvement on both sides. But I think going into that, I'm going to have to be much more adaptable in looking at that. And our conversation today has really made me more aware of that, because I'm making lists here of things that as I go through training, as I look into more of their organizational structure and more of their policies and procedures, of a list of, we need to change this, we need to do this, we need to make this better. But I think today it's kind of drawn me into, okay, how can I be more adaptable to what does the other side of that look like? And of course, I had no intention of going there saying, here's 10 pages of everything you need to change. But I think today has gotten me into, let's focus on the other side also when I'm done with this. So I make sure, is it doing that for a reason? And it looks crazy to me right now coming into it, but there may be a good reason of why that's happening on the other side. And how do we work at changing both sides and not just forcing it on, again, love and judgment. Am I just going to go in there and say, this is broke, fix it? Or are we going to find a plan that's going to work us through how both sides come together and we fix it? So
Yeah, mine's pretty similar actually, because I'm with a new client. We've had a pre-meeting, and I go and meet the team next week. And just you reminding me of that time at the hotel where I saw what people were capable of when they were given a vision, and then the freedom for them to go and do it without the need for other people to tell them what to do. I think I'm going to build that into the initial messaging for the team of these people, and explain that, you know, we trust them to be able to make decisions and choices about what we need to do differently within a framework that they're going to be given, and for them to just see how much positive impact they can make. That's it. So thank you. You've kind of sorted out you've sorted out my kind of opening speech for those department meetings that we've got next week.
that's awesome. That's awesome. I think that's good though. And I think leadership is hard. I mean, that's just it. It's hard. It's rewarding and I love it. But leadership is hard because you've got to, like you talked about, people need to be able to do what they do and to be able to have the freedom to lead themselves. But training people to get them to there, I think one of the hardest things I have faced is looking at all these situations and being able to tell, okay, I need to tell you what to do here because this is going to run off a cliff, or I'm going to kind of, even though I know this is probably going to run off into a ditch, maybe not a cliff, I'm going to let you take this and then we're going to work through it. And that's hard sometimes because nobody wants to spend their time correcting things. But I think that's so good for us to be able to let our people do that. And again, you never know. They may come back saying, everything is great. This worked out just like I thought and proved me wrong. But I think that's good to let them have some of that. And just like the submarine story of, this is what we're going to do, not coming to me saying, what do you think we should do here? And really building them up like that. So I love that. I
Yeah,
love that. This has been
you've
great.
reminded me of a quote that I'm going to share then before we go, just to
Huh?
finish this off. It's the book The Little Prince by Antoine de Saint-Exupéry, and he said, if you want to build a ship, don't drum up the men to gather wood, divide the work, and give orders. Instead, teach them to yearn for the vast and endless sea.
Hmm. That's good.
And I just love that thought of, if you can just inspire people towards the vision, they'll sort a lot of the rest of it out. And like you say, yeah, they don't know everything, and they need to accept that too. And it's the combination that can get the best results. So, Matt, you're a qualified values jammer now. So thank you very much for diving into this today. It's been great.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate you having me on. This has been good.
Take care.
Bye bye.